Welcome, everyone. We're so excited that you're here, and thanks so much for joining. Um, my name is Callie Cornell. I'm with the Center for Collaborative Education, and we are just so excited to welcome so many of you today. This is our first program spotlight of the school year, and we are so excited to have colleagues from Northampton High School to share a model around co-designing and planning pathways with students. And sort of a quick few housekeeping things to go over at the beginning, but then we'll jump right into hearing from the Northampton team. And so as just a reminder that this webinar is being recorded, and we'll have this posted for you to view afterwards or just share with your colleagues afterwards. We do also have a closed captioning available. And so you should see popping up on the I think it's the top left-hand corner of your Zoom screen. You should see a red live button that looks like the image on the slide here that we're sharing. And so you should be able to click that down arrow. It's an option to open up a web browser in your window, and you can view the closed captions in real time from that window. If we could head to the next slide, great. And so one of the things that we really try to do is make these events as interactive as possible. And we always begin our sessions with a quick connections activity. And so many of you are familiar faces and familiar names. And so you know this about our activities. But today we're trying something a little bit new. So many of you might be familiar with a Padlet platform. But if you're not, this gives you a chance to play around with it. And so we thought today, as we're thinking about Thanksgiving and holiday plans and maybe getting back to some travel, we try, we're hoping it's a fun question for today. And so one of my colleagues will drop a link to a Padlet in the chat. And if you open up that link in your web browser, you should see a world map. And our question for you today is, when you're feeling comfortable to travel, whether that's now or a few months from now or even a year from now, where is your #1 destination? Like, where can you not wait to get to after travel restrictions have lifted? So you should see, when you open up that window, it should be on the right-hand side of your screen, a pink plus button. So you can click on that plus button, and you can either type in the name of the location, it'll create a pin, or you can click and drag the pin that opens up to a place on the map. So let us know, pin that place on the map where you'd like to go. It can be anywhere in the world, and then type in your name where you pinned, and then submit that, add that to the map. We'll give you a moment to do that, and then my colleague will open up the map. We'll see all of the places all over the world where we all can just not wait to get to. And I see some requests to repost that link in the chat. So I believe my colleague Allison has just dropped that link in the chat again. I'm starting to see a few posts. Looks like lots of places all over the world. We've got a strong European contingent. People can't wait to go. Heading to places in East Asia and all over the US, South America. We've got really great representation. We'll give you another minute to go ahead and add your pin where your #1 travel destination is, or you can't wait to get to. And then I'll ask my colleague Laura to pull down the slide deck so that we can all share the screen, share that Padlet to see on our shared screen here. Awesome. And there we are, more people are popping up. So thanks for participating. And I just thought that this was a nice way to think about something, as we think about hopefully the world sort of opening back up again as pandemic restrictions and are lifted and travel restrictions are lifted, the places that we're really hoping to get to. And we see some really great places. Some look like they're out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. So I'm interested to hear from that person. That could be in Greenland, must be awfully cold, particularly this time of year. Some places in looks like remote Alaska. So exciting to see where you all are planning to head to or hoping to head to in the coming months or over the next year. And wanted to share our team. So this is our team that's here today. I, again, am Callie Cornell, an Innovation Pathways Consultant with the Center for Collaborative Education. And I'm joined by our Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education colleague, Jennifer Guakin, who is the Innovation Pathways lead. And Jennifer, I'm wondering, are there any other DESE colleagues here to introduce?
Let's see, I am not sure. Let me scan the participant list. Don't want to miss anybody. Or if anybody from DESE is here, if you want to unmute yourself and say hello, you're welcome to do that. Scrolling. Gosh, there's so many of you here. It's great. Yeah, I don't see anybody just yet, but I'll let you know if anybody appears on the scene.
Perfect. And I'm also joined by my colleagues, Laura and Allison, and Don, our colleague Don, who many of you are familiar with, might be joining us a little bit later today. And then also just to make note that Allison's here to help with facilitation and support for all of our tech needs. So as we move through the webinar today, if you run into any issues, please feel free to reach out to her in the chat, and she can help troubleshoot some of those issues behind the scene if you run into any issues as we move throughout the webinar. And for those who are unfamiliar with CCE, we are a Boston-based organization whose mission is to transform schools to ensure that all students succeed, and with a particular focus on increasing equity and reducing systemic racism. And CCE is partnering with the Mass Department of Education to provide technical assistance to both existing Innovation Pathways designees, as well as those who are in the pipeline to apply for designation. And so we're so excited to be back this year. We're in our third event of the year, our first program spotlight. And we have a whole host of opportunities lined up for you this year, a number of events, which for now will all continue to be virtual, but they include workshops and webinars, program spotlights, like today's webinar, and lots of professional learning opportunities along the way where we can support the sharing of ideas and connections across the Innovation Pathways programs and network. So for today's webinar, we're really excited to have you join us, and our goals are twofold. The first is to explore models for co-designing and planning innovation pathway programs with students, and we'll hear an example from Northampton High School. And as is always a goal within each of our events, is to build connections across the Innovation Pathways network. And so with those goals in mind, we have our agenda, which includes the introductions and connections, but then we'll jump right in. So we have our guest presenters from Northampton High School. You'll get a chance after, hearing a short presentation from them to ask questions of our presenters, and then engage in some smaller group conversation around different ways and models and strategies that we might bring students in to have student-led designs for our pathway programs. And then finally, we'll do some wrap up, and that will be the end of our time together this afternoon. So I have the privilege of introducing our guest presenters today, and we have two guests from Northampton High School to share their experience in designing and co-planning their innovation pathway program in the healthcare sector. And we share this as one model of student engagement and involvement. And later in the webinar, we're really interested in hearing from you all about additional models to consider, or additional models that you've tried for student-led pathway design. But our two presenters today, we have with us Misha, who is the Internship and Innovation Pathways Coordinator at Northampton High School. And she began her time in Northampton High School in 2018 as the Internship Coordinator, which later then included Innovation Pathways Coordinator to her title when she joined the IT pathway in 2019. So Misha's work is shared between developing students' work readiness skills, growing the importance of work-based learning models in the community, and advancing career awareness for Northampton High School. So Misha serves on Northampton's MyCap committee, school council, and when she's not hitting that pavement looking for new internship employers or revising student resumes, she can usually be found coaching the Northampton Blue Devils. Go Blue Devils. I think there's a few Northampton folks here today playing her favorite sport, which is field hockey. We're also so excited to have with us Katrina. And Katrina's a freshman at Tufts University studying biology on the pre-med track. So she's currently involved in several organizations on campus, which include iGEM at Tufts, the Chinese Student Association, and Hall Council. And she is an alum of Northampton High School. She graduated from Northampton High School earlier this year. And when she's not in the lab or in the library at Tufts, she can be found photographing scenic spots on campus, exploring Boston, its many restaurants, or like probably most of us, watching Netflix and spending time. And so thank you to you both for being with us today and for sharing your experience and your model of engagement. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Misha and Katrina to share a little bit about their process and how they went about involving students from the beginning in their healthcare pathway design.
All right, thank you so much, Callie. And thank you everybody for having us here today to be able to spotlight our program and the process that Katrina and I went through about a year ago. So Katrina, go ahead and get us started.
Yeah, sure. So I guess next slide. Last year I saw this like program offered at Northampton High School. It's like an internship program. And as like in high school, I was really interested in entering the medical field. So I thought it was like a really good opportunity to like gain experience. And I was really interested in like pre-med and public health. So I thought this would be like a good way to like explore these fields more deeply. And I think originally I was supposed to get an internship at one of the hospitals in the area, but because of COVID, it got canceled. So yeah.
So many of our internships went virtual, and we found that a lot of our traditional sites that are mostly in person, like hospitals, were closed. So we had to go with mostly a virtual model, and Katrina was able to continue that interest in work-based learning through a virtual internship. So the internship project, I had met with the employer, our community partner, Cooley Dickinson, in January of 2020, and with our dual enrollment partner in February 2020. So everything was, brewing for us to be able to get this pathway started. So when we got to the fall of 2020, it was how do we move this project to that next step? How do we learn about the local industry? And especially as now, the demands on the industry were heightened. And what do we need to know about our school and our needs in order to be able to move the pathway to the next process or step? So to be able to design the kind of pathway development as an internship meant that Katrina and I were working together as co-researchers in this process. Next slide.
So like going into this internship, we each like came up with our own goals for like things that we wanted to like do throughout the course of the internship, since this was like very organic and that like it was a kind of like a last minute option since my original internship was canceled. So like my goals that I came up with were to like learn about like firsthand from medical professionals about their experiences in like med school and just like how it is like to be a doctor and like what it's like in the clinic. Also to like develop my own writing skills and research skills through the various exercises that Misha like gave me throughout the internship to both like for my own benefit and also to give the pathway like more depth. And then also to like learn to communicate my own ideas more effectively through both verbal and like written communication, as well as to present my ideas more effectively.
Great. And my goals for this internship were to really identify my own gaps in knowledge of the local industry and to be able to catch some of those blind spots with the work that Katrina would be able to provide to us. And then also, it's important to me to engage with critical pedagogies for social transformation. So inviting Katrina into this process so that she could help us as a school identify what was important actually and be a part of kind of co-producing that knowledge really helped boost those outcomes of what we were looking for in developing a new pathway. And then obviously the logistical sense that we really just needed dedicated time spent on this project. And oftentimes, even without a pandemic, it's really difficult to be able to do that. But we had Katrina who wanted to be a part of the project and spend 100 hours on this internship. All right. So this is just an overview of the timeline, and it's rather small, so if you can zoom in your screen, but it looks really neat and pretty right now. But honestly, just like Katrina said, it was really organic, and that was part of the process, is that we were going to allow it to form and develop as we moved along. But we always remembered that we needed to focus on exploring the industry, we wanted to identify those essential elements of a pathway and make sure that we were taking our time and researching what they meant to us, but also to the innovation pathway process. And then being able to design our own pathway and start drafting the grant. So we started in October, and by January, we were able to get to that point. So what Katrina and I are going to do next in this whole research process is go through a little bit of each one of those focus areas. So that way you can see some of our artifacts and some of the process that we went through. So initially it was, what is an innovation pathway? We have IT pathways at Northampton High School, and Katrina was familiar with what that meant, but what did it mean for healthcare? What did it mean for biomedical? What did it mean for social assistance? So all these topics that we were kind of circling around. So what we were able to do was share the innovation pathway toolkit with Katrina, and she also got to watch a previously recorded introduction from the innovation pathway team about what is the IP model. And then we were also able to focus on those core design elements and have her research some of our local collaborators, so Worcester and Chelsea, and what they're doing with their work. Next slide. So some insights that I gained right away was that we need good marketing tools to be able to provide not only our stakeholders, but community and the people who are researching and wanting to develop their own programs to have more resources and information out there, because that's what Katrina used. She researched Chelsea and Worcester in order to find more information about the pathway.
Yeah, and then some skills that I developed from using these resources are like research and critical thinking abilities. Since the materials that Mishia provided me with were like really dense, I guess they had a lot of information that I had to sift through, and I definitely could not have included all of them in like my proposals or whatever recommendations I was making. And yeah, just like being able to like identify key points of information and just like highlighting the most important points like have translated really well into just like writing papers in university or just like doing general research.
Next slide. We also used labor market data. As you all know, the regional blueprints are really important to being able to identify what sectors are needing support in the workforce development, but also our development of career pathway programs and what our local needs were. Next slide. So we were able to ask critical questions of where do young people fit into this regional blueprint, and to be able to really get a lens from Katrina about what she finds interesting about the labor market trends and just general college and career readiness and how we're developing pathway programs to help meet some of those needs of students and our workforce development.
Yeah, and then some other skills that I developed here, similar to using the IP resources, were just like, again, identifying like key points from dense resources and just kind of analyzing complicated texts and literature to like justify why we were trying to implement a healthcare pathway in Northampton High School. Next slide. Okay, and then next, we also used a lot of equity focused materials. Like one of the main focuses that Misha and I had during this project were like making sure everyone in Northampton High School like had equal access to the pathway. Like we were exploring ways like through a lot of these. She provided me with a lot of articles, or for instance, I think on the slide there's an article that I read called like Healthcare Pathways for Opportunity Youth. And these articles like helped me to explore ways to like reach out to like ELL students or people who are like have traditionally like been less included in a lot of these programs, as well as like find ways to tailor the pathway to the needs or like needs of individual students rather than making generalizations which might not like work well with every student.
Next slide. So some of the insights that I gained from the research that we had done was the need for supplemental programs and features of the pathway that would support diverse needs. So really, again, diving deep into some of those equity questions really pulled out for us some critical questions and some kind of factors or implementations of programming that we could apply.
And then something that I gained from this exercise was just I was able to exposed to having a more equity-minded, focused mindset. And it's kind of translated into these days I'm more interested in public health or public policy in regards to healthcare. And one of the majors at Tufts that they offer is called community health, and it's kind of the intersections between health equity, the healthcare system. And it's definitely something that's really important, but often overlooked in the healthcare field. And I think it's really cool that we've been able to focus a lot on this and try to include it into our pathway. And then one big part of my internship that I spent I think a month or two on was just using local resources to try to research what to include in the pathway. For instance, I attended a series of webinars during STEM week. And I also reached out to a lot of professionals working in the STEM field that are around Northampton or in general. Yeah. And then I also looked at labor market data for Western Massachusetts and areas, again, to justify why we were creating a healthcare pathway, as well as research potential partners that we could build the pathway around, so we can use their resources to teach students necessary skills for entering the workplace. Okay, so for STEM week, I mentioned this just before, but there's every fall in October, there's usually a week where there's a series of virtual webinars for professions in STEM. And I attended a bunch of those, and those for this medical and social assistance field, to find ways to make the pathway useful for students rather than having a hollow pathway that doesn't really teach them anything that will actually translate to their career or their future education. And one way I tried to use the things that I found out from these webinars was I would take notes on key experiences or qualifications that people mentioned and try to include ways to at least expose or inform students in the pathway about these experiences that they would need, or if possible, help them to attain some of these certifications. Okay. And then the second part was I had a series of interviews with some medical professionals in the area. So Nisha and I originally had a series of questions that we wanted to ask them, and then I kind of tailored them a bit to depending on who I was interviewing, since they all had different positions and stuff. So usually I would send each professional a cover letter, indicating my interest, and then most of the time I was able to interview with them over the phone. And so I would ask them questions regarding their experiences in med school, or what they thought was really important, about what experiences were important to them, and try to find ways to both address potential struggles that students might have when first learning about healthcare, or potential struggles that they might encounter in the future. And I also asked these professionals why they chose medicine, kind of out of interest for both myself and just so we could find ways to expose students to some of these experiences, so maybe they could become more interested in medicine, since that was the whole point of the pathway. Yeah.
And what Katrina just said was a really kind of a key point here, was that she was doing it for her own interest and her own discovery, while also doing it for the development of the pathway and collecting information for that reason. And I really think that that aspect of the internship that Katrina modeled helped us to see that relationship building was really important to this whole process of building a pathway and to being a part of a pathway. And that we had some really, I thought, productive conversations on how mentors and internships should be both numerous and differentiated in both their breadth and their depth. So that way we could have a diversity of experiences for students. So whether it be a quick interview or a full mentorship through an internship, that's the kind of varied level that we were able to explore.
Yeah, and then I guess besides just learning about like the experiences of medical professionals, I also like developed a lot more like skills in interacting with them in like my interviews, as well as just like further develop my own note-taking skills and just like critical analysis skills through attending like a bunch of webinars and trying to sift through the information that I gained from like each one.
So the case study report is just one of those artifacts that I felt helped to drive our internship time together. And for me, it was a way that I could help show Katrina how to be a part of a professional community, how to be able to write up her research in a way where it could be read and then presented, and kind of like a writing for publication model. So it's just, again, one example of how to use the research in a way on a platform. So go ahead, Katrina.
Yeah, so like we had Misha and I, we co-designed our research questions, as you can see on this slide. And these were like different goals that I kept in mind when I was trying to like research for the case study, as well as like, yeah, just create the case study in general. And then after writing the case study, I wrote like recommendations for Northampton's healthcare pathway. And yeah.
Like she froze. So for Northampton's pathway, she wrote recommendations. And you can go to the next slide, Laura. Oh, you back, Katrina?
Oh yeah, is it working again?
Go ahead. It might have been mine too.
Well, yeah, for this slide, like, it's just the framework that I used when I was writing my case study. So it was sorted into like several sections. So we first had like the introduction where I would introduce like what I was researching. And then I had a background section which included the labor market data to both justify like why we were trying to implement a healthcare pathway, as well as like how it contributes to the growth of the healthcare industry in Massachusetts. And then I have the data and methodology section where I like talked about how I found my resources and like what I used out of each of them. And I have observations for each school that I researched. I researched 2 schools, Chelsea and Worcester schools. And then I have an analysis of my observations, as well as like identifying like the differences or like comparing and contrasting each schools. And then I had my recommendation section for Northampton High School, where I would like talk about, I guess, what I saw were the most important points in each pathway. And then I had my conclusion, and it was in total about an 8-page document. Yeah, so as I previously said, I researched the Worcester and Chelsea schools. And the reason why I chose these schools were because I found that their websites, in particular, out of the many schools that I looked at, were the most accessible. They had a lot of information about their respective pathways. They also had links to a bunch of their partner schools and external resources. And so for the content of the case study, I thought that some key points were the like the resources that each school offered. Like for instance, one of the schools allowed students to have like obtain CNA certifications, which I thought was really interesting. And that also ties into experiential learning, like students gain experience in the healthcare field while still being in high school. And then these schools had they had a lot of partnerships with various like colleges or like schools with medical schools, which I thought was really interesting as well. And then again, I used the labor market data and regional blueprints in my background section to talk about why the pathway would be helpful for like Massachusetts as a state, and like why we should implement this pathway in Northampton High School. And then the recommendation section was I made informed recommendations for the NHS pathway in order to like make the experience for students worthwhile and impactful, as well as helpful for like whatever future occupation they decide to go to, especially if it's in the healthcare sector.
So at that point, we were ready to start writing the grant. We're getting those ideas down on paper. So next slide, please, Laura. So I did for Katrina was, this tool may look familiar to some of you who are involved in the MyCap process, but it's a table that helps us distinguish where students should be able to, or what they should be able to know, do, and be able to understand at a certain point in their kind of progression through high school in those 4 different domains. So we used this tool as a way to think about the healthcare pathway. Where we want 10th graders to be in their exploration of careers at that point, or where should seniors be with college planning or career planning. So we were able to, next slide, Laura, take pieces of that and put it right into the grant. So that became really accessible for us. And I know we want to be mindful of time. So I'm just going to jump through a few of these, and Katrina's going to also share a little bit about hers. So things like including themes of the HCC healthcare career class that, eventually it's a dual enrollment class that students will take in the 11th grade, having bits of that in the biology and wellness, as well as flex block.
Yeah. And then one other thing that I thought was like really important was, again, like CPR or Cna certification, because it again provides students like experiences in the healthcare field. And then it also provides like an edge in college applications. And I know like a lot of students here are like EMTs, and it's really useful in order to like introduce them to like necessary or like basic aspects of healthcare that people need to know, especially if they're considering like a pre-health track.
Next slide, Laura. And then just to be able to have STEM weeks where the seniors at that point were able to give back and do this whole reciprocal mentoring, because mentoring and relationship building became a theme of our program and our pathway. So how do we implement that in a way where seniors are getting to have opportunities to lead? All right. We can go to the next slide then. So just these are just quick snapshots of what it looked like in the grant. And we left text in blue. That was the voice of Katrina and her writing and what we were collaborating on. And next slide. And to the point where even that section of dual enrollment courses was completely blue, because it was the research that Katrina went to the HCC website and was able to, in her own words, describe the importance of that class and what it had to offer. All right, next slide. So why this worked for Northampton High School is that we were able to provide that presentation of the research from Katrina to the administration, and they were able to hear from her perspectives and her internship experiences. And we were able to build more confidence in our informed suggestions and have share that evidence-based work with our administration team. And we were able to present the grant outline to our superintendent and to our community partners this past August. And what that meant was that impact that we had to be able to offer these suggestions and how it resonated even with our community partner, because then they were able to say, wow, this is what a student wants out of our hospital setting. And that our partner was able to go back to their community and start to develop new relationships and explore different departments that hadn't been part of internships prior. And then, of course, like yet to come is that presentation of the pathway to our students and to our caregivers and other stakeholders, and how we're really looking forward to being able to share with them that this work is grounded in student success and access, and that we really brought in student voice from the beginning, and that we are thinking already about how this is going to have implications for your future planning and your goals. Next slide for Katrina.
Yeah, and then I guess for me, I felt like this experience as a whole was like very worthwhile, and it was really unique in that it wasn't simply just like going into a hospital and shadowing a doctor. It was like being involved in the creation of a pathway for students at my school, and it was still like related to healthcare, which I thought was very interesting. And then through this internship, I also developed my interest more in health equity, I think, as I mentioned before, and it's definitely something that I'm considering pursuing in the future, or at least like doing along with my like courses in pre-med. And then, yeah, I've just like sharpened a lot of my skills, such as like my writing and communication skills, as well as like presentation skills. And yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Misha and Katrina. That was incredibly informative. I'll speak personally for myself, and I imagine for others. We have the great privilege of not just hearing from Misha and Katrina from what they prepared to share, but they are also going to be available for a little bit of a Q&A right now. We have time to probably take a couple of questions. And so what I would love to encourage you to do is, if you have a question for Misha and or Katrina, to feel free to, you can raise your hand, you can just go ahead and unmute yourself. We also invite you to leverage the chat here. So if you have a question for both of them or one of them specifically, if you just start your question with their name, and that way if we can't get to all of your questions right now this afternoon, they might be able to respond to them as we move through the day in the chat. But we do have a couple of minutes right now. So any questions from our guests, our participants joining us today for Misha and Katrina?
Or I believe there's one already in the chat from Michael.
Oh,
Scroll up a little
excellent.
bit.
Would you mind reading that for me? So I can...
Not at all. Let me find it. Scroll up just a bit.
Oh, I see
The
it
question
here.
for
Perfect.
Katrina. Yeah. What did you learn about yourself as a learner and or your career development needs that surprised you?
I think I also mentioned this like throughout the presentation, but again, I didn't really think there was much else to the healthcare field before, besides being like a doctor or a nurse or something. And I realized like public health was something I was really interested in as like a potential career field. And then as a learner, I guess like something I realized was that I was really interested in like just writing research papers. And I guess that furthered my interest in the healthcare field, or just like STEM in general, since that's something that we do a lot in the lab.
Thank you so much, Katrina. Any other questions from our participants listening in? I think one question that I'm actually wondering, and Misha, maybe I'll pass the mic to you first, what the experience was like for you sort of as an adult, really bringing in a student to be part of like this co-designing process, which is not always something that's of practice in school. So what was that experience like for you sort of as an adult in the building? And then Misha, Katrina, I would love to hear from you sort of what it was like as a student to be invited in and have so much agency over developing the pathway.
Well, I remember I didn't really know Katrina before this too. So we had just met, and it's kind of like a crash course of virtual learning about who you are and your practice. But I could see easily that Katrina was a really good researcher and she was very thorough. And when you see that kind of work from somebody, you trust it, right? You trust that the research is being done well. And that's where I think it was an easy relationship to build with Katrina. But I think that's a big part of being an adult who's trying to build pathways for young adults, is that I felt like they needed to be part of that process and have that voice, and to just trust that wherever we were going to go in this research, it was going to move the project forward, even if we didn't get to write that grant by January. And we absolutely did. So we definitely achieved our goals there.
And Katrina, how about you?
I guess for me, it was really refreshing, I guess, to be involved in this process, since it's definitely something I had never really done before. But at the same time, it was very overwhelming at first, especially since we had like no structure and this is very last minute. But I felt like I got kind of like into the flow as we like went through the school year. We would have like weekly meetings and come up with an agenda for that week. And then I could like contact Misha anytime I had like issues or something. So I had a lot of support, but it was very like independent work as well, which I really enjoyed.
Thank you so much. And thank you to both of you again. We want to give all of the participants who are with us today a chance to sort of get your own juices flowing and thinking about how you might start to translate what we heard from Katrina and Misha today into thinking in your own context. So again, if you have other questions for our guest presenters, please put them in the chat. Katrina and Misha are going to hang out for a little bit, so they'll try to respond in the chat box to those questions you have. But in the meantime, we are now going to transition to an opportunity in some small groups together. So in just a moment, my colleague Allison is going to share out invitations to everybody to join breakouts. They're going to be triads. And we're going to, each room, so your breakout room in the top left-hand corner, will identify whether we are inviting you to talk about question 1 on the slide, question 2, or question 3. We promise you don't have to memorize them all right now. Callie or one of my colleagues will share the questions in the chat box so that you can take it with you to your room. But we're going to give you just about 4 minutes with 2 other participants in this space today to just start thinking about whichever question is in your room title. So what might you be thinking about? Mechanisms to engage students, how to leverage the student experience to build a pathway, and what resources you might be using to inform and develop pathways in your setting. All right, and Allison, I think if you are ready, we are ready. So in just a minute, you should get an invitation to join a breakout room again for just about 4 or 5 minutes really quickly. Welcome back to the main room. We hope that conversation in your groups, we know it was really brief, but hopefully you got a moment to just sort of have the gears turn a little bit. So we'd love to start by just giving space. If anybody could share with us something that they discussed in their small group, and if you wouldn't mind just directing us to which question you were focusing on, but we'd love to hear from at least a couple of you about some conversation that surfaced in those really quick little triads that we had.
Hi, Laura, I'll go if
Awesome.
that's cool. We were looking at question number 2, looking at student experiences. So we have 2 of the
Oh no, Wes, I think we're having trouble with your audio.
Yeah, Wes is driving, so we had trouble talking with each other too. If he goes through a tunnel.
Happens to be 2 of ours. So I noticed when.
Oh.
Can you guys hear me right now?
We can hear you now. You're clear at the moment.
Oh, perfect. All right. Sorry about that. So basically what I was saying was that we realized that they're going the project lead the way route with their engineering pathway. But one thing I was talking about was creating articulation agreements with local community schools, or not even necessarily community schools, but for instance, like Worcester State, out in Dudley for him. That's one way to create more advanced coursework for, healthcare courses. We offer those at West Springfield High School. We offer like technical drawing courses after school. And then there's also, like I said, articulation agreements that are embedded into the student's day. So that's something that we spoke about. And yeah, as he mentioned, I was running through a tunnel. So it was a short convo, but it was great. So Fran, reach out to me if you ever have any questions. It was awesome talking to you.
Thank you
Thanks,
so much
Wes.
for sharing, Wes. Anyone else, whether you were question 2 or another question, what kind of conversation did you have in your small group?
We talked about on question 2, leveraging student experience, and Pam was sharing how she actually got her, like there were some healthcare providers that do things where they come in and let the kids like reverse shadow for the day. So like kind of similar to a job fair, except they all get to the students get to kind of walk through and see actually what they do. And I was like, that sounds great, because you don't know what you don't know.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing that, Molly. So the idea of like a reverse shadow and sort of flipping the script and creating a different kind of opportunity. That's fantastic. How about 1 or 2 more folks?
Oh, Callie, can I just mention one more thing?
Yeah, go ahead, Wes.
So I've been running like a school-wide initiative for all 9th and 10th graders using MyCap. And I can't tell you how beneficial that is for MIFA pathways. I mean, it's been fantastic. It's literally an awesome resource, and it's really a great way to market the program to students that you're not really sure if they're prospective students or not. And to be completely honest, they don't even know most of the time. So I would highly recommend utilizing the MIFA pathways whenever possible. Fantastic resource. And anyone who has questions about it or implementing it, I can let you know. I ran my 8th session. So I ran 8 1-hour sessions, and we covered the whole 9th and 10th grade. So everybody has a functioning MIFA pathways account, and they've been moving forward. But that helps, you can get some analytics from it and really calculate those students' decisions, and get them into programs like IP, early college, work-based learning, and be able to get them ready, rather than be reactive, you're proactive. So I just want to touch on that. MIFA pathways all day.
Thanks so much, Wes. And Jennifer reminded us in the chat that that's something that's freely available. And I clearly heard Wes volunteer to be a resource for any of you that are looking for more information. And I don't know if Andrew's still here. I saw Andrew unmute for a moment. Yeah, you want to have the last word for us here, Andrew?
Yeah, our team was focused on question 3. I was able to learn a lot from Agawam there, just in the value of really getting those partnerships in place with the companies and the corporations to really help guide the process of the development of the pathways.
Awesome, thank you. And I don't want to miss, I did see Michael, sorry, I missed before that you were using the hand raise feature. So we'll actually give you the last word for our small group share out.
I'm sorry, we were at question number 1, and although we didn't really get to it, I was with Ruth, and one thing that we're doing on Monday with our innovation pathway and advanced manufacturing is we have a mini field trip going over to our industry partner with a camera crew, and they're going to be doing a video to put together to be able to share with the school, the community, through the local access channel, and to be able to build more capacity and so forth. So with engaging more students, not only are they learning about the pathway as they go, but then to be able to share it out. So we're looking forward to getting that all together.
Excellent, thank you so much, Michael. So we are going to transition forward in the interest of time. What we are going to invite you to do over the next couple of minutes is one of my colleagues is going to share a link in the chat box to a Jamboard, and we'd love to just hear what's one idea or something you're taking away from today from either your little small group or hearing others speak during the whole group that's sticking with you. And while you navigate to Jamboard and do that, we actually had a question surface in the chat for Misha and Katrina that we found very compelling. And so while you share an answer on Jamboard, we're actually going to give them a moment to respond. So if you can sort of type with your hands and listen with your ears, the question is, do you feel that Katrina's internship is a replicable process for other students in other pathways? And what skill sets do you think they would need in order to be successful? So Katrina or Misha, either of you can take it first, but we'd love to just hear brief thoughts from each of you on those questions.
Go ahead, Katrina, why don't you go first?
Sure. Honestly, I think this internship is definitely very replicable. I feel like all students really need in order to get it done is just be motivated to help succeed with the project or something. I feel like everything else that you gain from it can just be I guess a product of the internship. Yeah, I don't think it's a very limiting experience at all.
Yeah, well put, because Katrina was the driver of the experience, right? She's the one that wanted to do pages of research and write a case study. But honestly, aspects of the internship like the MyCap tool can be done. You can do focus groups with students around having these conversations, to be able to have an internship where you're going out and exploring employers and doing the informational interviews and collecting research and data. You can morph the internship to whatever you need for your project to get from stage 1 to stage B. And for us in Northampton this semester or last year, it was writing the grant. So we needed to get more information so we could move to the next level. So I absolutely think it's replicable, and you've got Katrina's a strong student who's a good writer. So utilize her strengths to be able to make an impact in your school.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Katrina and Misha. I want to give sort of one big formal moment of gratitude to both of you for being here today, for sharing your experience and answering all of our questions. Katrina, I don't know if you might have a class you're sneaking off to, so if you do have that, again, thank you so much for being here. But we are going to transition to just a couple of wrap-up pieces here, and then we'll let you all go for the afternoon.
Excellent. And so I'll echo that thank you. You really had both Misha and Katrina had me thinking about the breadth of student involvement in pathway design and early planning, right? And thinking about how students are involved in advocacy and building employer partnerships and their research and analyzing blueprints and presenting to school committee and school leadership, like all of the things that I think as adults we feel like we have to tackle ourselves, like really think like students are capable and have the tools, and we can help support them through this process, building their capacity and our own simultaneously. So thank you for sharing all of that. And so in the last few minutes, sort of upcoming event reminders, you all know that the toolkit is available to you at any time on the Innovation Pathways Technical Assistance website. We promised we didn't ask Misha and Katrina to plug this, but they did. It plugged some of the tools in their resource. And so that is, of course, always available to you at that tiny URL link, which Jennifer's just put in the chat. And as we take a look at the next slide, we have lots of upcoming events that we're really excited about. So just after the Thanksgiving holiday, we have on Monday, November 29th, Building and Sustaining Employer Partnerships webinar. And so here our colleagues in Worcester are going to come to the table to share a little bit about the employer partnerships. What are the processes that they use to build employer partnerships? We'll have a panel of alumni students and of current employer partners to talk about their experience in building and sustaining partnerships, and also hear from some leadership within Worcester around sort of behind the scenes processes from the school district and school lens around workforce partnerships. And so really excited for that upcoming event. For those who are currently in the application process for designation, we have a support webinar on December 2nd, which is a Thursday, for Part B application support. And so you should received an invitation in your email, but please, if you're in the application process, join us on December 2nd. We also want to highlight on December 13th is the first PLC meeting. And this might be news for some of new news for some of you. The date was just decided. And so that information email, if you signed up to be part of the PLC this year, will be in your inbox shortly. If you didn't sign up for the PLC, but are still interested in being part of it, you can email me directly and we can get you registered for the PLCs this year. We have office hours open on December 15th. So you can get a half-hour time, either as an individual or as a school team, to meet with Jennifer and I to talk through any problems, to workshop ideas, just to say hello, whatever you'd like, we're there. And there's opportunities, a chunk of time on December 15th to do that. And you can sign up from our Innovation Pathways Technical Assistance website. And our first event of the new year will be on January 19th, which is our Designing for Equity workshop. So we'll have a lengthy workshop thinking about equity across innovation pathways, and what does it mean to be using and increasing awareness for equity with your innovation pathways as a driver for that. So really excited for that upcoming workshop, and we'll be eliciting some information from each of you in the coming month around some topics that we feel particularly helpful for you. And then on our final slide, we have one more link to share, and I'm realizing we're just a minute over, and that as always, we ask you to complete a survey. We do take a look at each and every one of the responses. I promise it will take you less than 2 minutes to complete, but let us know how today's program spotlight went for you, and ways that we can improve and make these more relevant and more helpful, more useful to you in the future. So that link is in the chat. Please take a moment, even if you can't complete it right now, to open it up, keep it in your web browser, and complete at some point before the end of the day. And with that, thank you all for being here. As always, the hour went by far too quickly, but a pleasure to see so many of you. And again, thank you, Katrina. Thank you, Misha, for being here, for preparation for the presentation today, and for sharing all of the good work that you engaged in last year. And we are excited to see you all at upcoming events. Have a great afternoon. Have a great Thanksgiving, and we'll see you soon.